Okay, welcome everybody. It's been a long time since I've seen anyone. It's been about 6 weeks, and looking forward to today's presentation with Darbe Schlosser. And let me find, now I lost my notes. I'm going to let Darbe introduce herself because I don't know what I did with what she sent me, but I will tell you that she was referred to me by about 4 different people from all over the country. And we were both in Barcelona and never crossed paths, which was kind of amazing. But she was highly, highly recommended by 2 good friends of mine and a few other people. So Darbe is in Vegas, and she has a program she calls Motorvation that she developed, and I will let her tell you all about it. So with that, Darbe, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you all for showing up. I'm really excited to talk to you about Brain Blast and the Think and Move Well method. And I just want to give a very brief background on how I got involved with all this. So I've been working with the Parkinson's population for close to 10 years, and I was doing a lot of martial arts-based training, and it was all in person. And then, of course, March 2020 came around and COVID happened, and I was trying to finish the Parkinson's Foundation community grant. And I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to finish it because of all the restrictions with in person. So they allowed me to reach out virtual and work with people on a virtual platform. So that's when I found Zoom. And I reached out to people that I knew in the Parkinson's community from other states. And what I found was that when we do stuff virtually, it forces me to be a better coach, a better instructor. I have to observe better. And it was teaching the people to more intrinsically connect with what they were doing. And I think that actually helps with the translation and with motor learning in general. So I've been on a virtual platform ever since I decided to go on there for COVID. And I'm so fortunate because I'm able to work with people from all over the world. And a couple of years ago, I wanted to get involved with taking the martial arts training and making it more dual task based, where you think and move at the same time. And that's where I got a group of people with Parkinson's from the ages of 30 to 80 years old. And we met every single week for a year. And I would present them with 20 digits of pi. And every day we would look at these digits. And for the people on the West Coast, this was at 6 a.m. in the morning. We would look at these digits and we would try to find meaning, the shape of the digit, the sound. Can we come up with really creative mnemonics and basically build our own inventory of mnemonics for these digits? And within a year, we have reached a story that links together that goes up to 551 digits. And Andrea, who is on this call today, I'm going to be doing a demonstration with her. She can recite all those digits forwards and backwards, and we can move around these digits in a very creative way that requires a lot of cognitive flexibility. So for the last year and a half, I've been working on Brain Blast, which is this dual task training. But I wanted to really connect this with something that has more of a theoretical background. So I'm finishing up my master's degree right now. And in school, I'm writing my thesis on the Think and Move Well method. So the Think and Move Well method is the theoretical framework that I created and that I'm writing my thesis on. It's evidence-based and it supports Brain Blast as a dual task intervention for Parkinson's. So if you could go to the next slide. What's up? If you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Okay, perfect.
You know what, before you continue, can I ask everybody to mute themselves?
Okay. And then if you guys wanted, you don't have to do it now, but if you wanted to pin Andrea, then I can see her up here because she's going to be doing the demo. Andrea Kleinbart. Okay. So there's 4 steps to the Think and Move Well method. And the first step is to customize cues. And customizing cues is cueing that is personalized to the person's specific symptoms during on and off states. Integrating tasks is the ability to reduce interference when doing 2 or more things at a time. Modulating effort is the ability to move big and small while changing tempos. And optimizing arousal, that's the ability to maintain control during states of stress. And I think that these are the 4 main factors that really need to be considered when designing PD-specific interventions. So going on to the next slide, We all know that exercising is crucial for reducing Parkinson's symptoms. Exercise, it can stimulate the release of dopamine, it can suppress anti-inflammatory processes, and it can enhance blood flow, driving neuroplasticity. That increased blood flow makes the brain more receptive to learning. Now, in the next slide, exercise prescription, it's become quite trendy over the last few years. Parkinson's and exercise is a very trendy topic, and there's actually a research study being conducted right now called Sparks 2 and 3 that looks at exercise as an actual prescription to reduce disease progression. When we look at prescription, we're talking about the type of exercise, the duration, and the intensity. So this universal prescription that's been accepted by most organizations for reducing progression is aerobic exercise of 80 to 85% heart rate max. Now, along with this comes some challenges, because I'm sure many of you have experienced fluctuating on and off states. And those fluctuating states, they can make it difficult to break through bradykinesia, to break through that slowness of movement to even reach that heart rate level. So the option could be that you could time your medication, but then that becomes problematic. That's not always possible with what's available with when you want to work out, when your classes are. You could take extra dose of medication that's sometimes recommended by doctors, but then there's that risk of dyskinesia. And if you're going to work out and you're very dyskinetic, you could be at an increased risk of injury, foot placement accuracy. If you're throwing punches and your arms are going all over the place, you could hurt your shoulder. Another thing to consider is that sometimes people have dystonia, and sometimes doing cyclical repetitive movements can exacerbate symptoms of dystonia. We also have to look at skill. These studies are typically done in a controlled environment on a motor assisted device. But most people with Parkinson's, and I'm sure you guys can agree, are engaging in exercise in community-based, skill-based programs. So sometimes just the skill itself or the lack of skill might affect a person to really maximize that potential to get that heart rate up. And if they are getting that heart rate up and they're not moving correctly, could there potentially be negative learning transfer? So we really want to make sure that we can maximize the benefit of exercise. So first, learning how to move well, learning how to think and move at the same time, and learning how to maintain that proper movement when there are states of stress is really important for translating. So if we go to the next slide, the first part of the program that I do every time I meet with somebody is we look at how are your individual symptoms affecting your ability to maximize your exercise output and potential. So there's 8 movements that I typically teach. And with these 8 movements, the goal is to maximize range of motion. And it's also to improve the ability to adapt and to quickly transition into new movements. So if you're doing one movement, let's say it's where you step forward and your arms go all the way up, and then you step back and your arms go to your side, and you alternate that step. It's a step initiation going forward, a step initiation going backwards. If we start to do that repetitively, very often the sequencing effect can occur, and that's when there's a reduction in amplitude and frequency of movement. But if we can time where our endpoint is in this movement, and we can connect it to some proprioceptive cue on the body. So we can connect it to the stretch reflex. We can connect it to the anticipation of our arms framing our face in our peripheral. We're finding the way our body is speaking to us on that end range of motion, and we're timing and mapping our voice to that. And then we map our voice to the beginning of the movement. So each movement that we go through has some particular thing that we have to do in terms of coordinating the arms and coordinating the legs, and very often coordinating rotation of the trunk. So when we take these multiple movements and we link them together, it's not just doing one movement well, it's being able to do one movement well and then quickly transition into another movement, and then another movement, and then another movement. And if your voice is guiding this, your attention is shifting. And the thing that I think is I get really excited about this stuff, because I feel like it's so important and it's not quite talked about enough, is that Parkinson's reduces automaticity of movement. So it requires attentional resources. But Parkinson's also affects the ability to shift attention. So here we need these extra resources, we need this extra attentional information, but we also need to be able to shift it to transition into different movements. So whenever I start working with someone, when we do sessions, they actually lead the class, because I want to see that they're able to connect their voice to the right part of the movement And when they can do that, movement automatically starts to organize. And now we can maximize that potential without the movement degrading and deteriorating. We then start to bring in, outside of these 8 main functional movements, we start to bring in martial arts-based movements. Martial arts is such a great modality to address Parkinson's symptoms, especially if we re-engineer it and really look at what is martial arts doing. Throwing a punch is the same thing as reaching. Being able to connect the feet to the hands while your base is moving. How do you then incorporate rotation of the trunk? There's such high levels of motor control that we can break out from boxing. So I implement these martial arts-based movements, and then we can even look into sport-specific movements. Let's say somebody does really well with connecting their voice, going through these movements, putting it on very complex repetition patterns, which requires that cognitive component, but they want to improve their ability to move their feet when they're playing table tennis. This is an important cueing technique because you're not going to maximize your benefit of table tennis if you're just standing there. There has to be movement of the feet in these skill-based exercises. So once we get these skills built out, the next thing we have to do is we have to integrate tasks. I'm kind of going off on my slides now. I always do this, I go off on a tangent. So if we go to the next slide. So I mentioned that Parkinson's, sorry, you want to go back a couple. Parkinson's reduces motor automaticity. So that requires attention. And when you attend to something, it requires resources. So now walking, which used to be automatic, is pulling these attentional cognitive resources from the brain. And then there's a thinking task. So having a conversation with your spouse or your friend, thinking about where did I park the car? So now these cognitive resources start to compete. And when these resources start to compete, that can lead to interference. And what happens when there's interference? Typically in Parkinson's, I'm not really sure the reason why, but it will take a posture second strategy where the movement is not prioritized. So there's typically a degradation in movement when there becomes this interference with thinking and moving at the same time. So if we go to the next slide, this is what I was speaking about earlier, how we use these digits of pi to create a foundation that is cognitive based, that we can use as a sustainable way to optimize the way attentional resources are being allocated. In a lot of therapy or exercise programs, there might be counting, and I do a lot of stuff with counting at the very beginning, but eventually the counting gets redundant. We want to be able to challenge the brain a little bit more. So we can take these digits from pi and we can constantly make it novel. We can move to different parts of the story. We can take these mnemonics and we can drop the first digit or we can drop the last digit of each chunk, and it seems like new information. It'll feel like new information. So every time that we increase the novelty or the complexity of the task, the brain has to adapt. When the brain adapts, it learns, it grows. And then we just keep adding to that level, that layer of complexity, and we can build it, and there's no plateauing. We can keep this going very, very far out into the future and very far out into terms of what we're doing. But there's also the benefit at the very beginning for people that have severe freezing of gait, people that are falling every day. They can benefit from the beginning of the training. And then the people who want to really enhance that cognitive and motor performance, they can go really far to the end. So what I did was the Think and Move Well method adopted a hybrid approach that implements sequential and simultaneous training. So there's different theories on dual task training, and a lot of this research is quite new. It was just 8 years ago that they said dual task training is too hazardous to teach people with Parkinson's because it increases fall risk. But the reality is activities of daily living and everyday life requires thinking and moving. So we have to train it. Now, one of the theories is we can just throw a person into dual task, multitasking, dual task training and just hope that the brain starts to figure out how to organize everything. What I like to do is I like to perfect the movement and do the single motor task, do the single cognitive task, integrate the two, and then reassess and look at it and say, wow, you did the single task really well for the cognitive and the motor. But do you see how when we integrated the two, all of a sudden your arm went up to this dystonic posture, or all of a sudden your tremor came out, or all of a sudden you just stopped moving? The brain prioritized the cognitive task so highly that the movement just completely stopped. Let's work through that. Let's grab these attentional strategies which are a part of that little toolbox that we built. And let's figure out how to automatically access the strategy to address that degradation. And then let's build from there. So if we go to the next slide, this is the one, the slow quicksand movement. So we want to be able to move and think in different cadences, in different tempos. We want to have this modulation of effort. So we don't want to just be able to move big. We want to move small when it makes sense to move small. So think about marching. If you're marching in place, your attention is actually in the front of the hip. It moves up the body. Once you start going faster, your body is naturally going to transform into a movement pattern of a jog. It takes on a completely different movement because these spatial and temporal parameters have this inverse relationship. And when we learn how to control that, we can better learn how to optimize movement, address Parkinson's specific symptoms, and prevent injury. So I'm going to show you another example. If I'm boxing and I want to maximize my punch past arm's length, this is the length of my arm, rotation of the trunk has to put my arm past arm's length. If I'm doing this, I can do it at a nice steady tempo like this. But if I start to increase that and I don't change the distance that I'm working with, that's going to be very uncomfortable. It's going to put me in an unstable state. I naturally have to bring the target closer to myself when I increase speed. The target goes further away when I slow down the speed. So we're modulating the way that we control the angles of our body, the space that we're moving with, and the tempo that our voice is connected to when we're reciting these digits from memory. So, and here I put on this slide, it says that, dopamine it regulates reward-seeking behavior. So when there's a loss in that dopamine, there's a reduced motivational drive to achieve reward. And when that motivation is reduced, the movement is executed more slowly and it does impair motor learning. So on that next slide, this is just an analogy. You guys can think of reaching for a glass of water. If it's a scorching hot day, you're really, really thirsty, the speed of your movement reaching towards that glass of cold water is going to be much faster than if you were reaching towards a hot chocolate, right? So in this situation, the need to quench the thirst is acting as the catalyst for reward. So what we can do is we can actually use sound that's mapped to the body and use that relationship as a catalyst for reward-seeking behavior. So if I know that my arm, when I go like this and I feel that rotation, it's almost like this, like a seatbelt. I can feel a stretch reflex. If I attach my voice to that feedback, I can generate a lot of speed on that movement, and I can do it over and over and over because I'm anticipating that feedback and I'm mapping it together. And mechanically, my body has to organize in a way to achieve that outcome that I'm thinking of. Now, this does take some practice to get that anticipation, that feedback very strongly ingrained. But with time, and sometimes very, very quickly, you'd be surprised on how you can organize vigorous movement just by using sound and some attentional strategies. So now we're going to talk about the stress, which I'm sure you all know that when you're stressed, your movement deteriorates. You move worse. Your symptoms present themselves when you're stressed. So it's critical to know where your current arousal state is relative to optimal. So on this graph, this is an inverted U. This is from a paper that was published from Georg Nonekes out of, I think, Bastian Bloom's lab. I just love this paper. I think it was published this year. So this inverted U graph shows that optimal is at the peak, but you might be A or B. You might change
the graph.
Oh, sorry, it's the next slide. There we go. Cool. Thank you. So on this, thank you. So on this graph, you might be A and somebody else might be C. But what's even more interesting, you can bounce back and forth and be A to C throughout the day based off of your medication fluctuations. So if you're A, sometimes a stressor can actually help elicit a more optimal movement response. So imagine being very apathetic and bradykinetic and off. We have to actually remotivate the system to throw a really fast movement. I'm eliciting a quick stressor. It's like an arousal spike to get me to move more vigorously. But what if now I'm peaking in my medication and I'm dyskinetic and that's causing anxiety, and next thing you know, my foot's starting to freeze. that person might be at a C, and we might have to down regulate that stress response. And I think it's really important to know where you're at and to really understand, to be very mindful of that, because then we can start to implement mental state strategies to either upregulate or downregulate the stress response. So what I do in the brain blast training is we want to train outside of an individual's comfort zone, just enough to create change and just enough to elicit a stress response. But we don't want to make it so the stress is so severe that there's a regression in learning. But over time, we can move that stressor gets further and further away. And the idea is that we can expand the stress threshold. So you can think of it, if you go to not the next slide, but the very last one, we can think of stress kind of like it's tuning a guitar. Okay, so the strings are going to get strummed, but they only harmonize when stressed just right. Not enough stress and it's flat, too much and it's too sharp. So there are many factors that can cause this tuning turmoil, in particular, the individual and or the environment. So with Brain Blast, we create a highly variable, cognitively demanding environment that places the individual just outside their comfort zone to elicit that stress response. We then reassess where their movement deteriorates. We apply attentional cueing strategies. And from there, we increase the novelty and the complexity of the task, and we just keep building. And that's what I have for slides. And I'm sure you guys have some questions. And then I'm going to show you some demonstrations on how this works. And if you're interested, maybe I can even teach you all 21 digits of pi.
Okay, so if you have questions, raise your hand. You can either raise it like this, or you can go to at the bottom of the screen where it says, let's see, click on reactions, and you can raise your hand there.
And I understand this is kind of hard to really grasp and understand without doing it and experiencing it yourself. And that's been the biggest challenge. Is I want people to understand this training, but sometimes we have to go a little further than the initial presentation. And I always offer, if anyone's ever interested as well, we can do small groups just to give people a better understanding. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're just going to have to go with it. And hopefully I can get you guys excited about what we can do with dual task training.
Okay, any questions? No? Do you want to do a demo with
Yes, so I see beautiful Karen and Andrea here, who I know both of them. Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
I actually just did a session with Andrea this morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time. She's been a part of one of our Brain Blast groups. There's a woman in Norway, there's someone in DC, and there's a woman in Jersey. And we've all been meeting for about a year. So Andrea is also the woman that my case poster was presented on in Barcelona at the World Parkinson's Congress. And she's going to
ago. And I'm quite active, but really a game changer for me, and why I'm so committed to this, is when I started working with Darbe. And the reason why is because it's the whole like cognition tied to that activity thing that I feel is the game changer. I do a lot of exercise, but I'm not necessarily tasking my brain at the same time. And so I've noticed that I've been able to reduce my medication. I was actually a candidate for DBS, and the surgeon refused to do it because I had gotten so much better. I mean, I'm like in better shape than I have been like 5 years ago. So I highly recommend you even just check it out. It is hard to explain, but I promise you it's been a game changer. I don't know what else to say.
Mary Rose.
Sorry, I'm having trouble pinning. Oh, Andrea. I can see a big version of her.
Oh, the pin. Does it show both of us? I'm not sure. I'm not the best when it comes to tech.
go to the view and just click on speaker. in the upper right.
I have them.
Go to
I have them
view.
spotlighted for everybody, so you should just have to
Okay.
click the view and speaker. And it
And I
should pop
guess
up.
really quick on a side note, when I did the cognitive assessment for the DBS, I scored high above average on everything except the retention of like a series, right? I don't know how to explain it, Darby, but a series of words, like where they ask you to remember 5 words and then later on they ask you to repeat them, or they'll give you a bunch and say what were the animals in that series. So I went from not being able to do that to being one of the people that Darby mentioned that I can do over 450 digits of pi now while moving and doing different exercises. So as far as I'm a very high stress person, it has really, this whole process has really made me be able to come and kind of be more present and calmer. So there's just multiple benefits. I could think of probably 5 more, but
Thank you, Andrea. And I also I mean, I want to bring this to you guys just to show you a way that you can do dual task training with anything you want. It doesn't have to be with me. It doesn't have to be, I'm not pitching you or anything like that. It's just, I think people are not aware of what they are capable of when it comes to thinking and moving and performance. And I take people on all the time that are they're terrified to come into a session with me because they're like, there's no way I can do this.
Mhm.
And I just started with a woman and we just finished a session before this. And in 2 days, we're up to 41 digits. Now, if a person's not able to do that and they're at a different level, because everyone's at a different level, everyone's on their own journey, and we work with where you are. And that's really, really important. I work with people post DBS, relearning how to move well. I work with people that cannot take medications just because their body doesn't allow them. So they're always in an off state. So I don't have any views of again for or anything like that.
Mhm.
It's just taking the individual and figuring out where can you improve and how can we maximize your exercise experience. Because now Andrea, she plays pickleball for 4 hours a day and she broke a record at the pickleball club. Okay.
Also, I mean, we all get frustrated. Everyone has ideas, but it's always nice to hear another idea that's working
Yes.
for someone,
Mhm.
so it's just another option.
Yes, and we'll get started. Carol.
So I don't know if I wanted to learn all the digits of pi, but I remember when I was first diagnosed, somebody said, well, when you're on the treadmill or when you're doing exercises, count backwards by 7 or
Yeah.
make up tasks. Is that what I'm trying to understand, is that what you're talking about, dual task?
Mhm.
When you do something cognitively at the same time that you're exercising?
Yes, absolutely. And when you're counting backwards, that's an arithmetic, which is a different part of the brain. It challenges the brain a little bit more differently. We bring in arithmetic into the training. We bring in words, we have digits, we bring in interference, we bring in long sequences of boxing. So a lot of the dual task studies, they might look at 1 or 2 different types of activities. And that's where it gets challenging because it's like, well, is it just those activities that are helping, or is it these other activities? Is it visuospatial memory? Is it digital working memory? What part of the brain and what activity should we be doing? So I try to bring in and be really creative and bring in everything I can possibly think of.
Okay, so is that the whole, so when I hire a trainer, let's say a half hour, should he do it the whole half hour? Because he's pretty creative. Or is it just for some of it? Or I don't know, Andrea, how long do you do that?
Mhm.
What is the duration, I guess?
So one of the things that I'll tell everyone when we work together for the prescription part of it is you can use this as an exercise snack, and it's going to depend on the person. So Andrea, she likes to use these exercises when she's coming off her meds. And for her, she feels like it gets the gears going in her brain and gives her that extra boost to move well before her medications. Some people, I like to use it as a preventative strategy. Karen on here, I've worked with Karen before, and we actually put the dual tasking with different postural changes to help disrupt dystonia temporarily, to maybe give her 15 to 20 minutes of a little bit of freedom before her next dose, so she's not taking it too early and having to take extra at the end of the day.
Yes, and I can attest to it. It really does work. It really does.
So, hi Karen.
Hi there. It works.
Yeah. So you don't want to do your entire, if your goal is to get the aerobic exercise, you don't want your entire exercise to be the dual task training. I think we have to really look at what is the goal and how do we strategically place this so that you get the aerobic benefit, you get the dual task. Sometimes you can get the dual task in the aerobic. We were talking about that today. But when we implement this dual task, we can do it in a way where there's a strategy that actually facilitates the two together. Okay, so imagine if you're walking and you're counting your steps when your movement is really off. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to keep that count going. And you're connecting your voice to your step. That's keeping that cadence going. That's actually a dual task, but it's facilitating. It's a dual task that's facilitating the movement. So that's what we initially do with the training. So we teach, I teach the 21 digits of pi, the first 21, and then we take these different movements and we connect the digit on the part of the body that organizes the movement. So for example, when we march, we're connecting our voice to this little pinching feeling right here in the front of the hip, and the same thing in the opposite elbow. So we're mapping our voice right here. We could count to 10, 1, 2, 3, or we could put digits of pi on there, 3, 1, 4. That's a lot harder because it requires a lot more cognitive resources to be able to pull that from the long-term memory and to be able to place it in the right order. Then after doing that, we can go into a different tempo. We can jog. Now you have to connect the voice to the footfall, right? Well, the footfall is a lot faster, so now you have to say the digits faster. So we're mapping the cognitive part to the motor part. And then once you get further along, we can disconnect it. And so I'm going to have Andrea show you. With these digits, would you guys like me to tell you the digits, the first 21, so you can connect with how we're getting these? Is anyone interested in learning the first 21?
I'll believe Andrea.
Okay.
No, go ahead and give it to us. I think that would be good.
Yeah, and so I'm going to do it really quickly, but basically I'm just going to show you how we do this. Now, as we go further into the story, the mnemonics that we use are a lot cleaner and crisper and much more succinct with translating to the digit because we get better at the story building. Andrea was one of the people that helped build the story. So at the beginning, the story is a little bit looser, but we start off where we imagine that we're up in the sky in a hovercraft and we're waiting for Sharon to arrive. Okay, because we're going to go trick-or-treating with her. No, we're actually going to be going in the the American Ninja Warrior obstacle course. We usually do this with Jimmy Choi. So we're up in the sky, pie in the sky, in a hovercraft. That's the first 3 digits of pi, 314. We have to remember those. 314, the first digits of pi. We're waiting for our friend to arrive. He's supposed to arrive at 2, but he's a minute early, 1:59. He arrives at 1:59. So now we have to go from the hovercraft to the ground. So we associate that jump with getting too sick. And that's a play on words for 2-6. So now we have pie in the sky, which is what?
314.
314. He's early. What time does he arrive?
159.
There we go. We jump and we get too sick.
26. Right.
There we
So
go.
314, 159, 26.
There we go. Very good. But we land. Okay. Now, instead of giving Sharon a hug as a greeting, we're going to give her a little spanking. Okay. And we're going to go boop, boop. So we want to think of a high 5 sandwich. That puts a 5 on each side. A 3 looks like a butt. The 3 is in the middle. 5, 3, 5. That's a greeting. Can you guys see that? Kind of how that's connected? 5, 3, 5. It's a high 5 sandwich. Very good. Then after that, we're going to go into this building where we have to pay our discounted entry fee. So it's like we ate a bite out of it. So discounts and entry fees sometimes are like $99 or $89 or $79. So we know that we ate a bite. It starts at 8, 89 down to 79. 8979. So some of these chunks have 4 digits, some have 2. And this is where that transition from each of them changes at different intervals. So from the top, what do we got, you guys? Pie in the sky.
314.
314.
Good.
159.
There we go.
26.
26. 535.
Good.
8979.
979.
There we go. Very good. I'm going to stop right there. We have, well, there's 2 more, but we connect them to martial arts movements. So the really neat thing that we do is in martial arts, there's 6 main punches. And they're all like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can use those numbers to connect to giving navigational direction throughout the story. around the corner, straight ahead. So we do a lot of stuff with movement through these martial arts. So this is where the digits are coming from. So what Andrea is going to do right now is, Andrea, I want you to go ahead. You can tip the camera down a little bit. All she's going to do, and this is what I teach people in the first session, is she's going to place the digit on the march. So her attention is placing the digit on the front of her hip and her opposite elbow. And she's going to do the 21 digits. And then she's going to automatically start jogging, and she's going to attach the digit to each foot. So then her attention moves down to the feet.
So just march and then jog.
March and then jog. Yep.
3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5, 3, 5, 8, 9, 7, 9, 3, 2, 3, 8, 4, 6. 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5, 3, 5, 8, 9, 7, 9, 3, 2, 3, 8, 4, 6.
Very good. Now, when we're building this, the movement is almost forcing the digits out. It's like sometimes you can feel how the movement is forcing the thinking, and sometimes the thinking is forcing and connecting the movement. This is important because this can be used as an off-state strategy. So if you guys are ever shuffling or frozen, the attention is like pushing the foot into the ground. All of a sudden your attention moves up your body and it puts the cue on the hip flexor that forces the foot off the ground. So these are like behavioral shifts that allow the attention to move and change the movement. So that was really good. Now we can make it a little bit more challenging to transition quicker. So we can take those chunks, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5, 3, 5, 8, 9, 7, 9, and then there's also a 3, 2, and a 3, 8, 4, 6. And Andrea is going to transition from marching to jogging in and out of the chunks.
Okay. 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5, 3, 5, 8, 9, 7, 9, 3, 2, 3, 8, 4, 6.
Okay, very good. So now we're modulating effort. We're transitioning into different movements. There's that motor flexibility. There's that cognitive flexibility. It's all working together.
Yeah, I could feel my brain hurting.
We can add passwords. Okay, so I could say to Andrea, all right, we're going to add 4 words. So I use a random word generator. We're going to put password number 1. We're going to insert it before the discounted entry fee. And what's the discounted entry fee, you guys?
8979.
There we go, 8979. So Andrea is going to do the same thing, marching to jogging. And before the discounted entry fee, she's going to do a squat. Now, one of the things that we learned, this is one of the first movements that we do, is on the squat, we're going to cross at the bottom and we tap at the top, but we also roll. So she's going to attach the password whisper, insect, trick, and ski. She's going to attach those words strategically to that movement so it stays organized, and she's going to insert that right before the discounted entry fee. This can act as an interference.
3, 5, 3, 5. Whisper, trick, ski. 8, 9, 7, 9, 3, 2, 3, 8, 4, 6.
Okay, really good. You see when she came back in from that interference, she had a brief hesitation of, oh, am I supposed to march or jog? What do I do?
I was remembering when I couldn't do those squats at all either. That used to confuse me.
Andrea can memorize 500 digits of pi, but she really struggled with coordinating her arms and tapping on the top of the squat, because we can do some really challenging things with this. We could actually flip everything. So we could take the first set and put it on the down, and the second set and put it on the top with the digits. So we could go 3, 1, 4, 1, 5. So my attention is shifting up and down based off of where I'm attaching the digit. It's actually really hard to do, and it looks a lot easier than it is, but we had to work on that for a couple hours. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay. So
If you have questions, just speak up, I guess, because you're spotlighted. We can't see anybody else.
Oh, okay. Okay. I can see people if they raise their hand or anything. So when I work with an individual and we do this, I'm basically acting as the guide that helps guide them through the cognitive problem solving process of moving and thinking. So I might work with somebody who has really like severe dystonia, and this dystonia might come out the second we start. The second we start to elicit that response, all of a sudden this dystonia might come out. Okay, how can we bring in a different movement that has a different cue to reset that? And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this. I just see this with people that I work with. If you get dystonia, sometimes like if you know that you're tapping your fingertip, it'll relax it. So those changes of postures can give it a brief moment of relaxation so that when we keep going, it's not just getting worse and worse. So we might look at, okay, how do we re-cue? How do we address that response that came out? Let's go back to the integrated task, see what happens, and then let's build from there. And Karen, do you want to talk for a second? Because we did a lot of stuff with dystonia, and it was really interesting. And she's actually one of the first people that I really I started to think about cueing in this way, specifically for dystonia, because I don't really work with that severe of dystonia. And it was a really great learning experience for myself.
Sure. I'm sorry, I had to plug my phone in because my battery was low. Yeah, just I had, when I first started working with Darby, I had just gotten, I was recovering from being in the hospital. So I had a really big decline, and my dystonia was very, very severe. And I would just literally get locked. And I mean, I learned all the digits. I learned how to use them to get myself unstuck from the dystonic freezes. And the dystonic states that I had were actually preventing me from walking. So I could do different counting strategies to get myself from the bed to the bathroom in the middle of the night when I'm completely off. So I have a toolbox.
That's really what it is. It's a toolbox. This isn't going to get rid of all the dystonia. That's not going to happen. But
yeah, but
Mhm.
I can get through it. It's like
Mhm.
it breaks it up, and then somehow that dystonia signal it's interrupted, so that it actually overpowers it.
I think when you see what's possible, you gain that confidence to
Yeah, the confidence is awesome.
I think when somebody has that toolbox, if we can build that toolbox, and I'm always adding new tools, we're taking tools out. You know, I might start a session with someone and they're like, you know, this one tool worked really well, but honestly, the other one didn't. Well, let's get rid of it. Let's bring in something new, because we don't want to have a toolbox that has too many options. We just want one that has a few options that are effective. And there can become a habituation with different tools, but we want, because Parkinson's affects that automaticity of movement, what if we could become more automatic at accessing the right tools? And when listening to Karen, you know, one of the things that she mentioned to me when I first met her is that she loves to exercise, but she's not able to maximize that exercise experience because the repetitive movement was putting her into this dystonic state. How can we interrupt that repetitive movement? How can we add variation? How can we get the attention so that it's constantly shifting? Sometimes that can make it worse, but I think overall we can find a way to find windows of freedom within it. And I think that, you know, somebody mentioned on here about like, how does this work? So I do one-on-one sessions. The training is more expensive than typical exercise like classes that are community-based. I'm not going to lie. It's more expensive, but what I've been doing is I do 24 hours with a person. Now I'm in the process of building out an asynchronous course that's going to reduce some of my time with the one-on-one, but I've noticed it actually increases and enhances a learning experience because there's more practice. And that's something that Andrea just experienced this last week. I didn't meet with her last Sunday. I gave her the workout and you came in and it was like, you guys were on fire. It was awesome to see that having homework and watching videos is really powerful. So when it comes to like, when I speak to groups like this, I wouldn't put a person through the actual one-on-one training that I do if we could find people that could just do a group together. And I would just jump them all the way ahead to the group class. So the group class is much more affordable and it's fun. And if we get it, you know, the goal is to really bond with your team. And what happens in these small groups is you're going to have this experience of being the performer, which can be stressful. Andrea, I don't think you would have said yes to this last year. Right? So it can be stressful, but then you get to sit back and now you're the observer. Now you can call the other person out because we want to celebrate errors. We want to recognize errors so that we can correct them with the right tool. And to be able to even recognize the error, you have to know what's going on with all this. That's a skill in itself. So there's this really cool environment of bi-directional learning that takes place. So if anyone is interested in learning more, I would give you a free consult, you guys, if you're interested in like really addressing more like severe symptoms that you're struggling with. Or if you guys are interested in a class, we could set up a consult that we could just chat about maybe getting a class going. And yeah, and that's it. We just built from there. Andrea is now doing some stuff in the class that is extremely, extremely complex. And I benefit from it because I have to know how to do it too. So it's not easy.
If you're interested in a class, just put your name in the chat, and we'll go from there.
Also, for full disclosure, I've been doing this for over a year now, so I was nothing like this when I started implementing these tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I remember with Andrea, she has some scoliosis, so we were working on just finding that symmetry with movement. We were doing a lot of stuff with boxing, and she's made a phenomenal, transformation, which I'm really, really excited for.
How long do people need to keep at it to keep it up? How much of a commitment?
What I like to tell people is that I'm just giving you tools that you can use in any modality or application that you wish to use. So I think it's important that that you're using these tools regularly, that you're using them when you really need them, like when your meds are off. So a lot of these are off-state strategies, right? So you don't have to use these tools and keep practicing with me. But I think that finding ways to apply them to your own walk in the morning outside, applying them to whatever movement modality brings you joy to keep that or active aging for forever.
Yeah, that's really what I was asking. What kind of learn the tools and then get them into a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
All right. We've got people who are very interested signing up. So I'd like to wrap up at this point, and then if anybody wants to stay on after we're done at 11, you're welcome to stay on and speak to Darbe a little bit more. But I would like to move on just so we can finish up the last couple of things we need to do. So Darbe, thank you. This was amazing. And it is being recorded, so if you want to watch it again, it will be available probably tomorrow. And and if you're interested in a class, let us know, because we will give you. I will give all the names to Darbe, and I have everybody's email addresses since you registered. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. For those of you who live in the LA area, I am having a book signing at my house with Laura Russell, who did this amazing book called Exquisite Warriors. And that's me on the slide in the middle of the page there. And it's like a children's book, where you flip, it's a flip book. She's come out with a soft cover edition. And if you live in LA, let me know if you want an invitation. I will send one to you. And we're going to be meeting November 1st at 2:00 in the afternoon at my home in Beverly Hills. So that's that. Let's go to the next slide. So upcoming, we've got, since we haven't met in so long, we've got a meeting next week with Paul Mayhew Archer, who was the big hit of the World Parkinson Congress. He was scheduled for a room with 200 people, and 500 showed up, so they had to move him to a different room. And I did miss the session because I was in another one, but I heard he is absolutely hilarious. So please register for that. And if you haven't already, we've got over 250 people signed up. The following Sunday, we have Yoga Nidra with Amy Wolf. Yoga Nidra is a relaxation yoga. So for those of you who don't sleep well, this is something you would do at night before you go to bed. And I think you will really enjoy it. And then November 19th, we have a presentation of a play called What I Didn't Say, written by Matthew Moore. And he was also at the World Parkinson's Congress. And he deals with issues about, it's a man and his wife, and she's the care partner. He's got Parkinson's, and it's based on a lot of interviews that they did. And this is something that you should bring your care partner to if you're going to join us, because I think both of you will get something out of it. It's really important. Okay, next slide. We have goodies. Oh, you can't see. My daughter has developed a website. She has started a website and keeping it in the family here. If you want any Twitchy Woman swag, just join us. There's a QR code. If you want to click on that, you can get the website. And next slide. Just a reminder about our peer-to-peer mentoring program. If you are newly diagnosed and looking for someone to talk to, or if you have had Parkinson's for several years and want to help someone else, check out the peer support program on our website, and you can fill out an application. It's going really, really well, and we're very proud of this program. Next slide. And for those who want to just have a chat room, we have on Tuesday mornings with Shelley Savoy. We have a chat room that's been meeting for probably a year and a half now. And it's just open to everybody. And then on Sunday mornings before our regular meetings, we have Twitchies Without Partners. So that's for those of you who are living alone. And I think that is it.